Hey everybody, I've got a quick one for you today, but I think it's an important one. We just got a BIOS update for the ROG Ally. Now, before I get into that BIOS update, real quick, tomorrow's episode of the NerdNest podcast, we talk extensively about the ROG Ally, and we recorded this yesterday before we knew about this new BIOS update. So tomorrow when you watch that episode, keep that in mind that we're a little bit behind on that information, but it was still a really good conversation, so I think that you're going to enjoy it. All right, let's talk about BIOS 322 for the ROG Ally. Let's take a look at the changelog. BIOS 322 on July 4th, 2023 through the My ASUS app. Bug fix. Resolved an issue that caused the ROG Ally to be stuck at boot up loading screen when users configured a password in a BIOS mode. They also modified the Ally's fan curve from 30 dBA up to 35 dBA in turbo mode when plugged in, and from 25 to 30 in turbo mode when using the battery. They changed the minimum fan speed in manual mode when the device hits a certain temperature. So that is the only thing that's in the BIOS update. The other stuff is all Armory Crate stuff, and we will talk about that later on in the video. That actually doesn't come out until tomorrow, so I can't show any of it to you. But let's talk about the BIOS update. Look again at those patch notes. There is nothing in there about performance. It's all about the fan curves. But recently, I made a video where I was comparing my results of the Cyberpunk 2077 benchmark utility running the exact same settings that ASUS said to run, and I got significantly different numbers than ASUS did. ASUS was running the game at 1080p on medium settings, and they got about 39 point something frames per second. When I ran the exact same test, I was getting 6 frames per second lower. I asked all of you if you thought that that was significant, and of course you guys pointed out, Bill, when you think of percentages, yes, that is significant because that is a 15% difference. So I wanted to run the same benchmark again and see if there was any variance to what I saw before. And there was. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the video. But first, let's talk about the fans, because that's what ASUS is actually trying to address here. Apparently, the ROG Ally is running a little hot, and so they're increasing the speed at which the fans spin. And I mean, look, when the ROG Ally was announced, it was compared to the Steam Deck, of course. And one of the things that a lot of people complained about when the Steam Deck launched was how loud the fan was. It never really bothered me, but there were a lot of people that it was a deal breaker for. And when the ROG Ally got in reviewers' hands, people were talking about how quiet it is. And it is a very quiet system. You don't really hear the fan during gameplay. Well, now that I have the new BIOS, how much louder are the fans? I have to apologize. I didn't think to record before the audio with this microphone before I updated the BIOS. So you're just going to have to trust me when I tell you it is significantly louder. Is it too loud though? I mean, for me, no, I'm not really going to be bothered by it. Yeah, you know what? It's a computer. When computers are playing video games and you're pushing the computer, it's going to get hot. And so the fans have to kick on in order to keep it from overheating. So it's a good thing that the fans are spinning a little bit more. I don't understand why people expect it to always be silent because our computers are not silent. Our laptops are not silent. Now, I'm currently downloading Cyberpunk 2077 on my Steam Deck so that I can run the exact same benchmark utility as I'm running on the ROG Ally, and I'm going to insert right now the audio from the ROG Ally, not the game audio, just the audio of the fan so you can hear how it sounds. Real quick, before I run the test, I actually took the muff off my microphone so you could hear this a little bit better, and listen to the left fan versus the right fan. Here is the right fan, and here's the left fan. And now I'm going to run the same test on my Steam Deck. The one qualifier that I think is very important for me to point out is the ROG Ally has a 1080p screen and the Steam Deck has a 720p screen, or actually an 800p screen. So I can't run the benchmark utility exactly the same, but I'm going to get it as close as I can, and let's hear what the fan sounds like. Which, by the way, I got 27 frames per second was my average on that test. So what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below that like button which one you felt was louder. All right, let's move on to the actual benchmark. And I want to compare not the ROG Ally to the Steam Deck, but the ROG Ally on 322 to the ROG Ally on 319. I didn't expect to actually get a difference in the frames per second when running the exact same benchmark utility, because in the changelog they didn't say anything about performance changes, but I did. The new BIOS is actually running Cyberpunk 2077 a lot closer to the expected numbers that ASUS said. A quick reminder that ASUS said we should be getting around 39 something frames per second when we are running this exact test. And in my previous test, I got about 32 or 33. Well, when I ran it today using BIOS 322, I got 37 frames per second, which is a lot closer to their actual targets that they mentioned. It's only 2 frames per second off, which, if you ask me, that's within the statistical variation that's perfectly acceptable. Now, I don't know what they're going to get on their testing units running the same test on 322, because their testing units were running the test on 319. So that's still information that we're going to have to wait for from ASUS. But I definitely did get an improvement over what I was getting previously. Maybe this is because the system is running cooler, so it's able to do a little bit more. I'm not sure. Quick note, on the previous video, I had the ROG Ally sitting flat on my table with a camera pointed down at it. That's so that I could get the shot, if that makes sense. I also ran the benchmark utility holding it in my hands, and I got the exact same results that I got previously. And today I ran the same utility twice, once holding it in my hands and once flat on the table so that I could get the shot. And I was getting 37 frames per second both times. So it's not really, there's definitely space under here for air to get in when you set it flat on the table. I wouldn't play with it flat on the table all the time, but when I'm just doing a quick test, I think it's perfectly fine. All right, let's move on to the new features that are coming to Armory Crate as well. We've got a new UX improvement. They've optimized the panel opacity, resulting in a more visually balanced display. They also say this, we've got new feature. They've modified the FPS limiter option to 30, 45, 60, 90, 120, and off. Now, this absolutely is giving us more options, but it's also taking away an option. Currently, if you open up your command center and look at the frames per second limiter on there, you have the options of 15, 30, 45, 60, and off. So yes, they are adding 90 and 120 to this, but they're taking away 15 frames per second. I'm sure that there's very few times, the number of times when people are running a game and using a 15 frames per second limiter are probably few and far between. I totally get that. But why take it away? It doesn't make any sense to me. Maybe it's a typo. We'll find out tomorrow when the Armory Crate update actually comes out. Moving on, we've got a new feature that they've added BIOS and Armory Crate configuration information to system settings. They've got a few bug fixes, and they've added a new feature which adds Alt F4 function to the command center to quickly exit games and programs, which I think is fantastic, because when you got a game that's not running the way that you want, or it's hanging, or there's a problem of some kind, invoking the task manager and then trying to poke around to like use the touch screen with Windows to exit the game is kind of a nightmare. So I'm very happy that we're going to have a very easy way in the command center to get that Alt F4. So there you have it. Those are the updates to the ROG Ally. What do you guys think about it? Let me know in the comment section down below that like button. And if you enjoyed this video, then I almost guarantee you're going to enjoy tomorrow's episode of the podcast. So make sure that you check that out. And in the meantime, check out this video right here. From the Nerd Nest, I'm Bill. Stay rad, everybody.